Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Escobar Varela. I'm assistant professor at the National University of Singapore, and it's my great pleasure to be here with you online, sharing something about the work that I've been doing on digital humanities and Javanese theater. I've been asked to address you in English, but I hope you will allow me to just say a few words in Indonesian. Pertama-tama saya ingin berterima kasih pihak penyelenggara konferensi ikonik dan meskipun kita semua tidak bisa bertemu secara tatap muka, saya pikir konferensi ini sangat penting dan saya senang secara daring kami masih bisa membahas kebudayaan Indonesia. So I will be sharing a few websites and projects that are all accessible from my own homepage. So in case anybody is interested, you can go to my Twitter handle, which will be displayed in the slides that follow. And from there, you can find the links to the videos and the websites I'll be discussing here. The image that you see here is a photograph of a performance of wayang kulit, which is an extraordinary art form that I've been studying for a few years, and that is incredible for a variety of reasons. One of them is that it has an extremely long history. It goes back at least 1,000 years, perhaps longer, and in many ways, it's one of the most important Javanese traditions of the performing arts. Sometimes when we share images about wayang, we see photographs like the one that I'm sharing with you at the moment that is zoomed in, where you can see the puppets here, the shadows that they cast, and in this case, you see the dalang, that's the puppeteer, and his assistant. But often what you don't see in these zoomed in images is all the technology that surrounds this performance. So for example, this photograph was taken at the exact same location, the exact same performance as the previous photograph. But what you can see here is that there are these screens that are simultaneously transmitting the performance to the audience that is sitting on the side. And sometimes throughout the entire village where a particular performance is sponsored, you could also see elsewhere these screens that show this simultaneous transmission of the performance. This particular photograph, I took it around 3 a.m. So some of the spectators had already left by that time. But if you had been here a bit earlier, you would see many people sitting on the floor and enjoying this performance, even though the performance is live at the same location. If you were to walk down the street, maybe a few hundred meters, you would see the actual live performance. But there are so many people there, not everyone can see that technology is being used today, even in the most traditional of performances. So in my work, I'm interested in two things. One is how technology is changing how we think about performances, but also how the artists, the dalang in this case, are using technology, even in cases where the performance is still traditional. I'll show you some other examples later where the actual form has changed to adapt to new technology. So one of the things that I started doing a few years ago together with my collaborators in Indonesia was to also track the places with the most performances today. So what you see here is a map. This is called a choropleth or a heat map, where you can see the different kabupaten, the different districts of in Java, and you can see that the deeper the shade of blue, the more performances there would be. So in many cases, this shouldn't be a surprise. You would see that in the special region of Yogyakarta that is around here, or the area around Greater Solo, there are lots and lots of performances. But we also found that there's this hotspot around Cilacap, Banyumas, Kebumen, and Ciamis that is not often talked about. So one of the things that we want to show with this project is that academic attention tends to be focused more often than not on the traditions of Jogja and Solo. I am myself guilty of that omission, because I also tend to speak mostly about those places. But when we collected all these mentions to performances from the internet and social media, we realized that a lot of things are happening also in this understudied region. One caveat of this kind of methods, one limitation, is that we can only show that which is available online. So there might be some omissions in our data. I worked also with some research assistants where we try to verify many of the things that we found online and also try to estimate how much we miss. So we think that there's perhaps between 10 and 15% of the performances that are happening daily that we don't really see. There are performances happening in faraway locations that don't get any mention on social media. So in some cases, the data that you see here is not a complete accurate representation of what happens on the ground. But you see a different kind of scale where we have thousands of performances that are being brought together into this map. Another thing that we do is, as you can see on this animated map over here, is that you can see how they change over time. And now I'm showing you data only for 3 years. We actually have data also for the past 2 years. We started in 2016. And you can see that the number of performances is remarkably stable over time. So on a given day, there will be between 10 and 20 performances. And this follows a pattern throughout the year. So during Ramadan, the fasting month, there can only be ritual performances. So there's a bit of a dip in the number of performances. And then in August, of course, for, 17 for the anniversary of the Indonesian independence, there will be a lot more performances. And also towards the end of the year, where we have like the beginning of the Suro, like the beginning of the Islamic calendar, you would see a lot of performances that are also happening around this time, especially a lot of ritual performances for the cleansing of a village. So you can see they don't match exactly the same month every year, because the lunar calendar is slightly different from time to time, but we see these patterns that change from one year to the next. And one thing that I'm interested in doing here is to really think of the scale of performances. So the kinds of things that we can learn from all the things people are saying on social media about performances in Java. Another thing that we can do is we can look at what people are searching for. So as some of you might know, Google, the search engine, publishes data on trends. So here we can see what people are searching for. So if you go to google.com/forward trends, you can actually see data for a specified amount of time of what users are searching for. In this case, I specified the search term wayang kulit only for Indonesia. So this is the amount of people that are, sorry, apologies for that. What you can see over here is the amount of people that are searching for the term wayang kulit in Indonesia using the Google search engine over time from 2014 to 2019. And you can see also these trends over time that actually correspond to what I showed you in the image before. So I'm not going to go into the analysis here, but we see some correspondence between these mentions on social media and what people are actually searching for. So you can see that there's this pattern over time of how people are searching for wayang kulit. Of course, now in 2020, sadly, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, many performances had to be shifted online. So since April, we haven't been able to really have a lot of performances live, but people are still searching for performances on YouTube. And that's data that we'll try to analyze again in the future. Here you can see the amount of people that are searching for the term wayang kulit on YouTube only in Indonesia. And you can see here that the trend is going a little bit above or over time. Now, one thing here is that we don't know why people are searching for wayang kulit. So is it really because they want to know more about it? Do they not want to know where a performance is taking place? Or maybe they don't know what it is. That could also be the case, that this indicates actually that people don't know about it and they want to figure out what wayang kulit is. But my intuition was that actually people are using this to find performances. So they want to know when a performance is taking place. So we can further refine this search data, and we can look for the word jadwal, which, as those of you who speak Indonesian in the audience know, means it's the timetable, it's the schedule. So you can know when performances are taking place. So the assumption is that when somebody's looking for the schedule is because they actually want to go and see a wayang kulit show. And one thing that we've seen from other sources of evidence is that many famous dalangs now have this large following of people who are willing to travel to another place, to another city or another village to see their performances. So here you can see that there's this interest over time that that has changed from 2014 to 2019. So even if you cannot see the legend here of the horizontal axis is not clear, you can actually go to Google Trends and find this for yourself. You just need to search, enter the term Jadwal Huayanculit, and you would see these search data over time. But then again, what you can see here is that it goes from 0 to 100. So that means that it takes the largest amount of data as the maximum point and then divides everything by that amount. So in some ways, we actually don't know exactly how much people are searching for this. And we wanted to find a comparison. So when we started this a couple of years ago, Game of Thrones was extremely famous, even in Indonesia. And we wanted to see how many people are searching for, Jadwal Wayang Kulit versus Jadwal Game of Thrones. And you can see here the red line, that's the one for the schedule of Game of Thrones. It's always lesser than Wayang. So there are more people interested in when Wayang Kulit is taking place and when Game of Thrones is taking place, except towards the very end. So this is in 2019, early in the year, where a lot of people actually searched for Game of Thrones, in part because it was the end of the season, but also because Pak Jokowi, the president of Indonesia, made a reference also to Game of Thrones in a political event in an ASEAN meeting. But so you can see over there, really the red trend overtakes Wayang Kulit. But overall, what we can see from this is that people who are using the internet are using it also to find about Wayang. So that's kind of one part of what I want to talk about, which is how we can use uh, data from the internet to understand how the audience, how the users are thinking about this tradition. But I'm also personally interested in how artists are modifying the tradition and are combining elements of this very old history with new sources of culture, for example, popular culture. And one example that I want to talk about briefly is a performance called Wayang Hip Hop, which, as the name suggests, is a performance where the artist combines the conventions of music, of the puppet construction from Wayang and also from hip hop music. So here, for example, I'll just show you one example. This is one of the Punokawan, or the clown puppets. This one is called Petruk in the tradition. And here you can see that he's been reimagined as Patrick with a global sounding name, and the way he's dressed indicates that he's this urban youngster. But there is some features like the type of nose, the face, that you can see it still maintains some of that traditional conventions. And you can see here the image in full. This is the work of Ki Catur Banyak Kunchoro, a very well-known dalang from Yogyakarta. And you can see a full-length recording, so the entire video of Wayang Hip Hop here at the Arsip Wayang Contemporer, or Contemporary Wayang Archive. This is a free video library with translations and notes. So you can see his work and the work of many other people who are interested in combining the tradition with new sources of inspiration. And one other thing that I did when analyzing this project was that I talked to a variety of people. I talked to spectators, I talked to artists, I talked to sponsors, and through those conversations, they explained to me the different dimensions along which Wayang is adapted. So the diagram that you see here is my interpretation of the conversations that I had with people. So I understood from them that the main things that contemporary Wayang does, the main areas where innovation takes place, are the language, the puppets, the story, the space, and the music. So then what I did is I classified each of these dimensions for every performance. So what you can see here is my representation of Kichatur Banyak Kunchoro's Wayang Hip Hop. And in this diagram, this is called a radial chart. So you see these three areas. So everything that is at the center would be a completely traditional show. Then you see this other circle that would be something in between. And the outermost circle is something that is extremely contemporary. So this is my interpretation based on my conversations with people and Other people might disagree with the way I classify these performances, but you can see how this comes together in a website I will show you in a minute. So the idea here is that, in my opinion, this is still close to a traditional use of the language because it's still in Javanese, whereas you see many other performances that use a combination of Javanese and Indonesian or even English and other languages. The puppets, as I showed you a moment ago, are here. They're in between because even though they are a new take on the Punokawan, you can still see some features of Petruk. The story is also somewhere in between the tradition and innovation. The space is also somewhere in between, and the same thing is true for the music that combines not only hip hop but also many of the conventions of the way in which, for example, the Dalang sings. So you have this suluan, like the way in which the Dalang sings during a performance, that are still retained in this performance. So in order to illustrate this, I created this website uh, that you can see interactively here. So here you see again, you see the Punokawan explaining to you how to use the website. And you can select, for example, from here, uh, uh, any of the performances like the one I showed you. This is the one on Wayang Hip Hop. And you can see here that this diagram is loaded interactively. And you can choose other performances so you can see how they are different along these dimensions. And if you think this is interesting, I encourage you to come to this website, play with it. And then you can actually, if you put the mouse over, even if you cannot see it now on your screens, here is an explanation of why I decided to classify, say, the puppets as being in between. But if you want to know more about that, you can also just click here on puppets, and then on this panel, you get to see a longer description where I justify my interpretation of these choices. And in many cases, you also, if you go to music, for example, you would also see here some excerpts of the music together with my explanation. So this is a multimedia essay. There are other cases, just to show you a comparison, where this is from Eko Nugroho. This is called Preseteruan Getah Pening, also a type of contemporary wayang, where this invention of the new puppets, as you can see here, doesn't really have anything to do with the tradition. They are still recognizable as wayang puppets because of the way the control sticks are inserted onto the puppet, but the images in this case are surreal, and they have no real connection to Petruk or Narodo or any of the other characters of the wayang tradition. So in the website, as I showed you a moment ago, you can see these interactive essays. And this is just a representation of all the diagrams that I made for all the 24 performances that I analyzed. I want to show you a couple of other projects that I've done. This one is a Wayang Kulit encyclopedia, a digital encyclopedia. And the objective of this project was to take a list of common stories and then construct a social network of these puppets. So one way you can think about this is that it's a bit like a Facebook of Wayang Kulit characters. But in this case, the link between two characters is something that we call the co-occurrence. So that means if you have two characters that are in the same scene, so for example, you often have Semar, who is the father of the clown puppets, and Petruk together in the same scene. So each of these will be represented as a node, and there will be an edge or a link, a line connecting them. So you can go to an interactive version of this website here, and you can see, you can click on any of the puppets. You can then see a full description. And one thing that we've tried to do here is to include a lot of data on each of the puppets. So you can see a very short description of how the character is presented in the Javanese version of the stories, a comparison sometimes to the kinds of versions of the stories you would find in India and South Asia. Here you see some lacon, so that would be a lacon would be like one story that is presented in a overall one night long Wayang Kulit performance. So for example, here you can click on Dewa Ruchi, that is a very well-known lacon, and you can see here this blow-by-blow description. So in each scene, you can see where the like the characters that are involved. So we call this a balungan or a skeleton. So this is a skeleton of the story for one night. And here you can also see this graph over here that shows you the network of puppets, but only for this one story. whereas the one I showed you at the beginning is for the entire collection of all the stories. Here you can also see the family relationships. So you can see the like the silsila. So this is the like who are the parents, the siblings, and the spouses of each of the characters. Uh, More information, and very importantly, all the sources. So there are competing versions of many of these characters, and these are all the sources, all the Wayang encyclopedias that we consulted. And here, what you can see over here is something we call the link weight. So this is the characters that are most likely to appear in the same scene as the current one. So Huercutoro is the character most likely to be in the same scene as Cresno, which is the one we're seeing now. And you can also go here to Huercutoro and see the same level of information for this character and for all of them. And you can also use the search bar here to find out more information about these characters. We have this contemporary Wayang archive that I've already described in a moment, but this is just how so you can see how it looks. So here you have these 24 performances. We have notes on the performance, translations. If the performance is in Javanese, it's also been translated into Indonesian. And for all cases, we have performance, the translation into English. And you can find these at cwa-web.org, or you can find the link through my Twitter handle, which is Miguel Jogja. Another project that I want to describe briefly is a philological edition of a Wayang performance. So this is based on a book by Professor Bernard Earps, who is also in this conference. I believe he's also one of the presenters here at Iconic Conference. So based on his book that you can see here, it's an incredibly detailed translation of a performance of Tewuruchi by Kianom Suroto that has a, even if you cannot see it in detail here, he has the original in Japanese, the translation into English with a lot of notes and images. So this was first produced as a book, but then in collaboration with him, what we did was we did an interactive version of this particular performance. Sorry, I'm moving around the Zoom controls. And what you can see here is that this is all based on the work of Professor Arps. And you can see the performance, the original language, and the translation, and this is synchronized to a video. So while you can go and get the video, the actual book, I'm going to play and hopefully this will work. So I'm just showing you how you can actually jump around and see the synchronized part of the dialogue here in the video. This is based on this incredible work of Professor Arps, who translated and added also all these notes. So you can see the notes are incredibly detailed for every term of the performance. And we then made an interactive version of that book, which is freely available for anybody who's interested. And here you can see a screenshot of how that looks like. Another project I want to describe that you can also find on the links. This is a project that we did for a museum, for the Art Science Museum here in Singapore. So this is called a tangible interface. And the idea is that people who come to the museum, they themselves learn to become a dalang. So we have these different puppets. We have here the book, which is like the banana trunk. But what's unique about our interface is that we have sensors. So we have different kinds of sensors to detect rotation, to detect also when you put the puppets in different parts of the book. So the idea is that you come here, like you see here, a kid that is visiting this exhibition. And then when you come here, you yourself become a dalang. So the interface teaches you the meaning of certain puppets. So for example, this puppet over here called the Cayon, as some of you know, has a lot of really important meanings in a performance. So not only is it full of symbolic meaning, but it has dramatic meaning. So for example, usually the dalang would lift it, rotate it, and place it on the side to indicate scene changes. So the idea here is that you come here, you rotate the puppet, and the puppet itself has a sensor, which is the same kind of sensor that your hand phone has. So you know how sometimes your hand phone can detect if you rotate it, if you move it horizontal or vertical. So we use that kind of sensor, so it knows when you rotate the cajon, you put it on the side, and in that way, the people who visit this exhibition learn the conventions of wayang. And also here you see that the kotak, this is like the box where usually the dalang would use a tempolo, which is a wooden mallet, to knock onto this puppet box. And through a rhythmical pattern, he would also cue the musicians that are sitting behind him in order to begin, accelerate, or stop the musical accompaniment. And we created this system that actually can recognize this knocking. So you learn also how the dalang is controlling the pace of the performance and communicating with the musicians. And the last project I want to talk to you about is a collaboration with the Yale Art Gallery and with Professor Matthew Cohen from the University of Connecticut. So in the Wayang Encyclopedia I showed you a moment ago, one thing we don't have is the images, in part because there are many possible images of one puppet, and we didn't want to select just one image. But working with this incredible project at Yale University, uh, this is what we're doing at the moment. Is let me just move the Zoom thing here. This is based on the Walter Angst collection of Indonesian puppets, which is currently at Yale Art Gallery, and you can click here on the image of different puppets, and this collection, the Walter Angst collection, has 20,000 puppets, give or take. And one thing that is special about this is that you have puppets from different regions. So sometimes you have the Surakarta version of the puppet, the Yogyakarta version of the puppet. You have some that are very old that go back to the 19th century, and some things that were just made in the early 21st century. So it's incredibly diverse. This is just a prototype. But the idea is that here you would be able to load any of these 20,000 images. You can also, by clicking the mouse, you can rotate it. You can also decrease the transparency, so you can overlay them. And if you click on these ones, you get more information about these puppets. And this is linked to the digital Wayang encyclopedia that I showed you a moment ago, so you can see more about the character that is represented by that puppet. So that is the end of what I wanted to share today. In conclusion, I would say that the digital humanities bring two new things to the study of Javanese theater, which I hope became evident through my presentation. One is that it provides us with new ways to think about data and evidence, for example, by collecting information about what people are searching for on Google, but also new ways to communicate research results with the wider public, in some cases by developing these tangible user interfaces, but in some interactive open websites that anybody can use anywhere in the world to learn more about these extraordinary traditions. So with that, I reach the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, terima kasih. And I can be contacted through Twitter if anybody has any questions, but I hope that if you find these websites useful, that you will also go and visit them. Thank you very much. So that's it for my presentation. Again, thank you to the organizers, and I hope that I can interact with whoever is seeing this video at some point in the future in real life. Thank you very much.